Okay, first off, I just want to talk about the timber requirements, the plywood. I've got a combination of 12mm and 18mm, or depending on where you buy it, you know, 1/2 inch, 3/4, or you can do it all the same if you wish. You know, this one is made of a slightly different construction, which I'll go through in more detail, but this one's all 1/2 inch ply. I prefer to make this one where the carcass, or let's say the two long front and back and the two ends are made of 18mm, and then the top and the bottom are made of 12mm. Having the carcass made out of 18 just gives you a bit of extra strength, and because of the way that we're going to join the corners, we want some meat to be able to put the screws through into, so we don't want the ply too thin. But also it means when the lid's open and there's tools in the lid, that it's not going to tip back because you've got plenty of weight in the bottom part of the tool chest. Now, not everybody can get 8x4 sheets. You know, I can't even fit 8x4 sheets in my van actually. So to make it convenient for people, there's a lot of DIY stores that sell 6x2 sheets. So it's about 1830mm by about 607mm. Amazes me how everything's in metric, but they've still got them labelled as 6x2 as well. And the way that works out quite nicely is in the length, because you've got 1830, you can get two 910mm sections, and you can mark in from one end, from this square end in, give yourself your line. You mark in from the other end, give yourself a line, cut in the gap in the middle, and then square up both of those ends, either on a saw or you can just skim the tops with a hand plane. And then before then, if you rip this part up there to give you 460 width, which is the height of the tool chest and is the depth of the tool chest, the part that you've got left here, this thin strip, makes the sides, fronts and backs and ends of the trays that go inside. So it works out a perfect size to use up as much of the material as possible, and you're not going such big panels that you've got to, you know, you need a panel saw, or you're restricted trying to work on this in your garage or your shed. So I think you probably need 3.5 panels. There's 3 panels there, and I'll put a list up, but there's a three panels there, cost me £78. That's not a trade price, that's me going into the DIY store and buying them. So I dare say if you look around, you'll find it cheaper. This is beach faced plywood, and there's a combination there of 12mm should I say, and 18mm thickness. So you can see what I mean. You're going to rip this piece off, which is going to be 147 but less the thickness of a cut. So let's say 140 to 145 wide. That will make the sides, fronts and backs of your trays. You've got a 910 piece here, a 910 piece here, and then we've made this 460. So that can be the front of your tool chest, that can be the back of your tool chest, and one of the others will cut to get our ends, but we'll rip this piece off first again off the other one. So it just uses up the timber best, and it means you're not having to handle massive panels unless you really want to, and you can get it cheaper. This is the Carcass cutting list. So there's a couple of pieces in here where you've got a choice, and it depends on the thickness of ply that you're using. I'll explain that, but obviously we've got 2 pieces that are the front and the back, 2 pieces that are the ends, and we've got 2 pieces that are the top and the bottom. So, you know, 3 pairs. So the front and back, we want 910mm long by 460 high by 18mm thick. The ends, we want 2 pieces that are 423/4mm long by 460 high again by 18mm thick again. The reason for that being underlined in red and being variable is it depends how thick of ply you're using. Because for me, I know that I need looking down on the chest, it's got to be from front to back 460. Well, if I'm using 2 pieces of 18mm ply and the end is sitting within them, 2 18s are 36, take them off means 424. So I need a piece that's 424. The reason I've gone 423 is that if I make the carcass a millimetre thinner, it means when I put my top on, if there's something slightly out in the carcass or the ply has got a little bit of a bend on it, I'm not going to get a situation where the top doesn't reach the outside edges of the carcass. I've got a mil to play with. For example, if you used 12 mil ply, that's only going to add up to 24. So you're going to have to adjust the size of the ends and make it longer. Then when it comes to the top and the bottom, they're made out of only 12 mil thick ply and 910 mil long, 460 wide by the 12 mil. Again, I've put 910, 911. I mentioned earlier that you might as well leave them slightly over, because once the main part of the carcass, the sides and the end are put together, you can lie that on top and see. You can always trim it just before you assemble it, but leave a little bit on, because if under assembly it shifts slightly, you want to be able to go around the edge and trim it with a plane. So they're the measurements, and that's the reasoning behind it. But again, if you've got a panel saw and it cuts everything absolutely accurately, and you've got really good quality ply and it's all flat and you're confident, cut everything to exact size. But I always think with these things, trying to clamp up the corners on them and everything, you want a little bit of leeway for yourself just to make it easier. That's the two 18mm thick boards ripped down. So now I've got one piece 460 wide, and then whatever's left is 145, depends on the thickness of your cut. That will be for trays. This is now for the front, the back and the two ends, you know, because I've got two boards there. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to mark up there, mark up to my 910, square a line across, mark from this end 910, square a line across. I'll be left with about, well, what's that, 910, 1820, and then 1829 boards, about 9 mil in the middle. I can do a cut through there, cross cut that, and then square up both the ends, and I've got my front and I've got my back. And then of course on this piece it will be different sizes because they're for the two ends, and I'll come to that. Right, now that's marked out, 910 from one end, 910 from the other end. And then depending on how you're cutting it and how accurate you feel you are, you need to cut right up the middle of that waist, where you can cut close to both of your lines and do two cuts. And then clean up the ends. Even if they end up 909, doesn't really matter if they end up 911, so long as they're both the same, and you can check that and give them a skim with a plane. So we just want an equal pair for front and back. And of course, if you've got a bandsaw, once you've split that down the middle, you've then got both of your lines still left, but then you can access your bandsaw and trim up to your pencil line, and then you can then go, skim it with a plane just to get it smooth. I found actually using my Veritas crosscut back saw, the larger one, I can cut through this and it keeps a really nice straight line, and it cuts without lots of breakout on the ply. So that's what I tend to use, but I cut safe anyway. That's how clean the cut is off that Veritas saw. Left most of the spare on the waist on that one. That's it. I'll trim that one on the bandsaw. That one on the bandsaw. Then I'll put the pair together, check the measurements, probably clamp them together and whip the plane over, make sure the ends are square and they're both the same size, and then that's them two done. Now I've got to mark out and cut the shorter pieces for the ends. Now the ends go in between the front and the back, and we want overall to be 460, and if anything we'd rather it was slightly under 460, because we'll have cut the top at 460 wide, and if it overlaps by a mil or so and allowing for things that are not going to be 100% square, you can then trim off the edge once it's all glued up. So actually what you need to do is measure the thickness, exact thickness of your ply, and obviously double it. So let's say this is 18, then we've got 36. Take the 36 off 460 and we're left with 424. So I know I've got to cut these inside end panels at 424, but I'll probably cut them at 423, give myself a mil to play with. So I'm going to mark those out they can, because of the size of them, I'll probably cut it into a shorter board to start off with, mark the two out, cut in a shorter board, and I can cross cut those on the table saw. But again, however you're doing it, track saw, hand saw, you know, I'm working on the basis that you can get all this dimensioned up. Okay, so when you get onto the second 18mm board, we only need the two ends, and then we might as well cut it pretty much in half, so that this part is then, if you've got a table saw, you can then get this on a table saw and it's easier to handle. But we might as well leave that piece the size for another tool chest if you're going to make another one, and I am. So I've measured 9/10 in from there, and again, I know that my ends need to be 460 less 36 is 424. I'm going to leave myself a mil, so 423. So if I cut that at 423, I'm then left with a piece here that's bigger than 423. So I'll cut it safe side of my 9/10 first. That piece can then be saved. Then I can come along with the piece that's left, go on the table saw, cut it to this line with the fence set, and then just repeat the cut here, and then whatever waste I've got here, I've lost a little bit. So that gets me two perfect ends, and it gives me one complete board, which I can use in a future one or for something else. Got a square end on that piece anyway. I've set the fence at 423, so I can cut that. That'll give me another square end which I can put up against the fence, repeat the cut. That'll be the two ends done. That's a pair of ends done. So they're the 460 high, but they're only 423 long. So they're going to go that way. So they're 423 that way, so that by the time you've got an 18mm there and an 18mm there, it makes 460. But I've allowed that mil, so it'll probably be more like 459. So that when I put the 460 lid on, I've got a bit of wriggle room. So already you'll see, doesn't take long for the main carcass to come together. Once you screw it all together, any bends that you've got in the ply, because it doesn't always come totally flat, that'll all pull out. So, right, so now on the bench I've got four parts. I've got the front, the back and the two ends. So all that's left to complete the rectangular cube is the top and the bottom, which are in 12mm as opposed to 18. So I've got my piece that I ripped down that's 12mm. Now that wriggle room thing again, I'm just making, depends on how accurate you feel you can saw and what equipment you've got, but the top, just effectively, you can pin it on, you can screw it on, and it sits on top, completely on top. It doesn't go into anything. And the base the same, and the base is even more forgiving because you're going to put a plinth around it anyway, so you won't see it. So actually, rather than cut them at 9/10, where we cut these panels, it's as easy to just cut these at 9/11. And even when you rip them, you can rip them, I allowed for it by making the ends slightly smaller, but you can make the width of these a little bit bigger as well. Just so that when you pin them on, it'll overlap a little bit here, and then you can go around when it's all glued up and just plane it off. But of course you don't want to leave yourself too much cleaning up work to do. So I've done the same again, measured in from one end 9/11, in from the other end 9/11, squared it across, it's 12mm ply. I'm going to split this down, trim the ends, maybe on the bandsaw, whatever you've got, plane them square, but these are not joining up against anything. They're going to overlap and you're going to end up cleaning them up, so it's not ultra that you clean those up. You could even just leave the extra on for now, and then once you've done the main part of the carcass and that's assembled, you can just put one of these on top, see what wriggle room you've got, trim it a little bit better to size before you start fixing it onto the chest. Hope that makes sense.